Hello and welcome to Europa Universalis IV. I am Lord Farns, here with a quick Ottoman guide. I'm just coming off of a Ottoman Let's Play where I conquered almost all of Europe and all of the Middle East. So, when I give this guide, I do have some experience in what I'm talking about. So, the Ottomans are quite an interesting country. You start off fifth in the world in great powers. Start off in the Greek Anatolia region, and you will quickly probably become the largest empire in the game without trying too hard. It'll take a little while to pass the Ming, but you could be second in the world in development really quickly. So the Ottomans are in the process in 1444 of conquering the remains of the Eastern Roman Empire, in this game called the Byzantine Empire, or Byzantium. And you've got a lot of strengths going for you as the Ottomans early on. You tend to fall off late game, but this was just kind of an opening steps what to do in the new expansion. I have an older guide that talks about what you should do initially starting, but this is an updated version of that. So first things, excuse me, you are Muslim, Sunni Muslim, so you get all the benefits of the Sunni Muslims. You also can mess around with the Muslim schools, specifically this Hanbali school for the reduced aggressive expansion impact is going to be really good for you. So being friends with Dawasir down here could be to your benefit. Another one that's good is the Maliki school here, which you have to be friends with Granada, and then I think it becomes Tunis afterwards. Can be useful if you want to pop institutions early. Of course, you've got the slider between mysticism and legalism. You're the Ottomans who tend to be more tolerant of other non-Muslims. In fact, you've got ideas for that. I recommend going more towards legalism than pure mysticism. On the other hand, mysticism will let you convert land and conquer a little bit easier. But the 10 tech cost and the tax and the manpower is really huge on the Ottomans. So, the Ottomans have a unique form of government, the Ottoman government. Essentially, it's a harem government, and it means that you will never not have an heir when your ruler dies. They will always be of the Osmanoglu dynasty. Probably said that wrong. However, if your king dies without an heir, for example, if this guy dropped dead right now, he's 12, which, by the way, he really should have a regent, but he doesn't. We would get an heir of his dynasty, but it would be a weaker heir. By that, the game essentially means that you'd have like 50 legitimacy, and the stats are usually pretty bad. But if your ruler survives to, I think it's 25, you get to pick between a choice of 3 different heirs. And yes, it does tell you what the stats of your heirs you're picking are, so it's worth hovering over their little tooltip description when it pops up in the middle. And you can usually get a ruler that's at least about a 10 or a 12 in total stats. You start off with one of the best rulers in the game with a 16 ruler, Mehmed II. He also starts off with the wonderful conqueror idea, ruler trait, which allows you to conquer a lot more earlier on and stuff. So that's a really neat mechanic from the Ottoman government. Essentially, it helps with absolutism, unjustified demands are better, and legitimacy is not really an issue for the Ottomans unless you have like a really bad heir. You'll also get other events that may strengthen or weaken your heirs or replace them or your consorts. It's a bit interesting, but you can easily figure it out. In terms of ideas, the Ottomans start off with, I want to say one of my favorite starting off ideas in the game. The only ones I might say would be higher would be like Castile's, because I just like Castile's ideas. The free morale is amazing. Austria's not bad either. But you start off with 5 discipline, which is huge. Most people get 2.5 discipline, or they get the 5 discipline at the end of the idea tree. You get it at the beginning. It means your army is going to do more damage and suffer less casualties in battles. And it's really hard to get discipline. You really get it through idea groups. So it means your army at the beginning of the game, it's going to be stronger than pretty much all other armies in the game, except for ones that have morale bonuses, like Austria or Castile, or Burgundy, if I remember. Your next idea is, which is, you also have +3 tolerance of heathens, which is really strong because it means that, seeing as you also have the mini, I said that wrong, of course, but it's the Muslims' version of non-tolerated heathens. They actually have an estate, which is kind of cool. And if they have a certain amount of influence and other stuff, they can give you tolerance of heathens. So based off the starting land that the Ottomans have, let's see, which is pretty much a handful of the land over here being given to the Dimini, the Orthodox Greek lands. You're pretty tolerant of heathens, plus the 3 tolerance here means that at the beginning of the games, you're completely tolerant of heathens. Of course, that implies you have 100% legitimacy, which is important to remember. But it means if you hover over these provinces, they are tolerant, and more importantly, they don't uprise too much. If you get it higher, they also don't hurt your religious unity as much, but in this case, they are doing so. One of the things I recommend is that you go through and assign a good portion of these Orthodox provinces to the Dimini for several reasons, one of which it makes the state more loyal to you and have more influence, which can be leveraged well, because if it goes up high enough, you can also get decreased tech cost. As you can see, if loyalty is above 60, tech cost -5, tolerance 1 of heathens. Again, every tech cost you can get is really good, and for them it's pretty easy. Plus it makes the estate, makes those provinces tend to stay fairly loyal. On the other side, you cannot convert them. You get a -100% conversion modifier. So if you give lands to them, you're not going to be able to convert it later. Can be good, can be bad. Next ideas is one of the strongest in the game. You get decreased 20% core creation cost, which is amazing. It's one of the reasons the Ottomans are one of the easiest countries to, massively expand with. Probably one of the easiest, or the easiest to conquer the world with. It's played extraordinarily well, which is currently beyond my talents. You also get +1 max promoted cultures. This is nice because when you get to some of the later ages, which it wants, I think it's the age of, let's see, discovery. No, it's age of absolutism. Multicultural nation, you need 5 accepted cultures in your land. So this just gets you 1 culture closer to that, which means you can get that age bonus better and get further up on more likely to get absolutism in a golden age then. You also have plus 20% manpower recovery speed, which is really strong. I think the only one that might be higher would be like Russia, but otherwise you're on par with them. It means you should always have a good amount of manpower, assuming you become as big as the Ottomans did historically. You should really never run out of manpower in wars unless you're really losing or outnumbered. Next one, you get 15% infantry combat ability, which is a nice little bonus. Infantry combat is not as good as infantry combat. Cavalry combat ability is not as good as infantry combat. Messed up there. But it's still pretty nice. You get it a little bit later than it would be useful when cavalry is starting to become less and less useful. But again, it extends your use of cavalry a little bit further. You also get cost of reducing war exhaustion, -10%, is by far and away the worst of the Ottoman ideas, I would say, but it helps a little bit to save you some diplomatic power if you're fighting lots of wars. Plus 10% national tax modifier is really good because the Ottomans usually have a much larger force limit for their army than they actually are able to support, so this allows you to support a larger army and better advisors. Since you're also going to control a lot of land, the bonus is even stronger. Next one, 10% trade efficiency. This is really good because if we look at trade, Constantinople has the ability to steer quite a lot of trade towards it. In fact, it can pretty much swallow up all trade coming from the east that doesn't go around South Africa here. Well, of course, it's very hard to actually steer all trade from Alexandria, but still, you can make Constantinople bring in like 250 or more gold a month, which is really strong. Your next idea, 10% cheaper ship costs. Not really strong, but it does help you late game with actually having a navy capable of controlling the Mediterranean, especially galleys, which are historically what the Ottomans have, which means galleys are really strong in, of course, interior seas, but they fall off if you try and send them into the ocean. So, worth remembering. Ottomans also have one of the stronger finisher ideas, which is land force limit modifier plus 33%. This means the Ottomans are going to have a massive army. It's not as big as the Russian bonus, but considering both the Russians and the Ottomans were known for having massive, large, cheap armies of infantry, it's historically accurate that you will have probably one of the largest armies in the world, even if you don't even expand outside of the Middle East, which is immensely wealthy in development and will easily make you the largest nation in the world, unless, Castile and Portugal colonize all the New World or France conquers Europe. So, in terms of starting stuff, I know I've been talking for a little while. The big thing you want to do initially is you have a mission called City of the World's Desire. It's even going to exist in the new patch where they changed the mission tree a bit because it's historically what happened. It gives you a claim on conquering the Byzantines' capital, Constantinople. And considering how small the Byzantines are, once you conquer their capital and their other two provinces, you can just wipe them out completely. They do have Athens as a vassal, so it's also worth remembering to take Athens province, otherwise you'll be stuck with a one-province vassal for quite a while until you can annex it. Other things to do is you have all these national decisions for being Muslim, and since you have a good Muslim ruler, you can get nice bonuses. They also push you further towards legalism and help you with converting Shia land. You should do pretty much immediately because the Shia are not going to be tolerant of you at all unless you go humanist ideas and get the bonus from there. You also have another one, which is a unique Ottoman decision, which is expand the Devashim system. And it's worth taking. You have negative events that come from it later, but it's overall really worth it. Gives you 10% more manpower, which is quite strong. Considering your goal is to have pretty much a huge manpower pool and a huge army, and then to try and make it high quality and to conquer the world that way, that just helps you a little bit more in having a larger army. Another reason why the Ottomans are always going to have a large, massive army, even if they're tiny, just bonuses like that. Other stuff to note is if you can, later on, you'll have ability to adopt the provincial government system. You have to have a admin tech of 5 and a good ruler. That will give you +1 unrest in all your provinces, but an additional +1 national tax modifier. I usually take it. On the other hand, it is more unrest, but 10% tax modifier is really strong on a large empire. The other ones are, of course, like complete innovative ideas, get a bonus. Found an Indian trade company, get a bonus. State firearm regiments, army technology, increased drilling and stuff. But those aren't unique to the Ottomans, so I won't even go into those. In terms of ideas, I'll do that before I actually go to the Ottoman moves. In terms of ideas, people are a bit torn on what the best Ottoman ideas are. Some people argue you go humanist and become completely tolerant of all regions, have really low separatism in your land, essentially have a very stable, very peaceful empire. And while that works, it's a lot harder to become a massive empire that way. You'll have a much more stable empire, but it's harder to expand and grow because it doesn't give you any bonuses towards coring land, getting monarch points, or fighting wars. Thus, what I argue for the best starting idea is probably defensive. And this is really contentious. Some people disagree. Some people say you go quality, get the infantry combat. Some say you go quantity and just have a massive military early on. Others will say defensive to have better general siege abilities and discipline. But I think defensive is worth it early on. The army tradition is good, but you want the 15% morale of armies, because once you have that and your 5 discipline of armies, your army is going to be better than 95% of the other armies in Europe, even without anything else. The only exception is late game France and late game Castile, or of course if Prussia forms, or Poland-Lithuania survives that long. But overall, you'll be able to take on everyone like Austria, Hungary, the Mamelukes, even the Timurids, and their whole mess over there is really easy to handle with just those 2 bonuses. And since morale early on is really strong, it's useful. Also, the decreased land maintenance cost is strong. Decreased fort maintenance is really good. Increased reinforcement and the decreased land attrition is really strong as well, because it will allow you to support a larger army, suffer less casualties just marching through your own land, which of course will give you more manpower in the long run. If you are hurting for manpower later on in the game, quantity is useful. But other than that, I recommend for your second idea group, or your first if you don't feel the need to go defensive, you take administrative, get the 25% core creation cost cheaper, which will stack nicely with your 20% core creation cost cheaper for 45% or so cheaper core creation cost. It's also important to remember you have other modifiers that can affect core creation cost and other stuff, but those are really good. Plus this overall just allows you to have more states. The mercenary is not too useful, but the admin tech cost and the number of states means you'll have a lot more admin power to core states. It'll be cheaper to core states and keep up in tech, which the Ottomans are going to core a lot of land if you play them even just historical. And if you try and conquer the world, this will save you enough admin power you won't fall behind in tech. Pretty big reasons. Other stuff, offensive ideas is really good for the siege ability and the larger army and discipline. Late game, you want to snag quality for the artillery combat bonus, the discipline, and also that it stacks nicely with some of the other stuff like economic to give you even stronger infantry combat ability. For example, one of the best ones is if you can stack it with innovative ideas, which will give you, cheaper institution and tech, which almost makes worth the whole idea group worth taking, plus the cheaper advisor cost. You can get a nice plus 20% infantry combat ability, and at that point your armies are unstoppable, literally unstoppable. In my Let's Play, which I did, I took on pretty much the rest of the world except for some of Asia and won in a coalition, so it's quite possible to do so. Quantity it is, I don't recommend taking unless you keep running out of manpower, just because you have enough bonuses already just from being the Ottomans that cover it up. In terms of diplomatic ideas, there's not really too much you want to take. You want to take trade. Influence if you want to conquer faster, quicker without coalitions. I probably should have taken that in my Let's Play because I started fighting coalitions, and fighting coalitions is never worth doing. On the other hand, some of the stuff like having vassals and integrating land isn't too useful, because if you take admin and get the core creation cost plus the Ottoman bonus, your land's automatically cheaper for you to core than have a vassal core and then annex later. So it can be useful in the right places. You don't really need diplomatic ideas unless you're really wanting more diplomats. Exploration and expansion are both useless unless you want to colonize, which I don't really recommend you do. You can always take the colonies from the Europeans later. Maritime is totally useless, so don't take it at all. Espionage might be useful, especially if you're having issues with corruption, spying, and just overall want another diplomat, cheaper cores, and all of that stuff. In terms of administrative, innovative can be good. Religious, if you want to go for uniting Islam or just be really pious Muslim, is a necessity to convert as much land as you're going to have. If you take religious, don't take humanist. If you take humanist, don't take religious. Economic ideas, always take if you're... Always take, pretty much. It's kind of a rule. And obviously I already spoke about administrative. In terms of military, aristocratic's not useful, nor is naval ideas particularly. Aristocratic can be useful, but I never find it too useful on the Ottomans. Anyway, that covers the Ottomans idea tree. Let's see, I believe that's pretty much all of it. As I said, you probably want to stay more legalist in terms of your piety if you're trying to stabilize your country and catch up in tech. Otherwise, go mysticism towards conquering and conversion. I pretty much ran legalism the whole game, and it was totally fine. Just pointing that out. So in terms of the Ottoman start position, obviously you're going to try and kill the Byzantines early on. One of the things you should do first of all is go to Ragusa here, this one province merchant trade republic, go under influence and revoke this rather silly guarantee you have on them. They're not really particularly worth keeping alive. They don't really like you that much. They will be your ally at the beginning, but if they grow, they won't, because they're another religion. Also, you're wasting a diplomatic slot that you really shouldn't be wasting. Especially if you intend to have any vassals or make alliances, it's one you don't need. Other things you should do, go to Tunis, get an alliance, get a royal marriage, and that will give you a very strong ally for pretty much the entire game, unless for some reason you want to conquer them, or Castile, Spain, Portugal decide, hey, we want all of North Africa rather than just a little bit that we're supposed to conquer. Outside of that, your next allies are debatable. I would not ally yourself to any of the Anatolian miners or any of the nations in the Caucasus region here. If you're looking for allies, look further afield like the Timurids or Ajam, or down here like the Naj and stuff. The Mamluks are going to hate you because historical rival almost always rival you from the beginning. The Korakunlu are a different religion, heathen school, plus they want your lands, you want their lands, so they're going to hate you. Another good ally is the Crimea up here, royal marriage alliance with them. There's a chance an event will fire where they have a succession. It usually fires, but there's a chance if you have good relations, they will accept Ottoman overlordship and you will gain them as a march, not a vassal, a march, which means you can't just annex them, but they'll prove to essentially tie up Russia, Poland, Lithuania, and stuff for a while. Plus, you can always feed them the other horde lands by attacking, giving them the lands in peace deals and stuff. And they can prove to be a pretty good vassal. Plus, they're fairly loyal because they're already Sunni Muslim and they like you. They're also the same religious school, which is a nice little bonus. Plus, it's a free march. Who wouldn't want a free march with a couple? I think they have like 60 or 70 development, which early on is really useful. In terms of actual expansion, the first thing you really want to do is conquer the Byzantines as soon as you can. So December 11th, 1444. You want to declare war and conquer them. Unless, of course, they've immediately allied themselves to like Poland, Hungary, Serbia, and I don't know, the Mamelukes all at once, which is not going to happen for the AI, but human players tend to do it because that's the only way you survive as the Byzantines. While you're attacking them, you really don't need too much. You can pretty much just use your initial starting army to do so. I recommend you go through and raise another army. Now, one of the unique things about the Ottomans is they have Janissaries, which are elite Ottoman troops you can only get from non-Muslim provinces. They have a whole unique modifier. They receive 10% less shock and fire damage. Reinforced cost is 100% higher, but they gain army drill 100% faster, which is really nice because they're essentially your elite shock troops, but if you lose them, they cost a lot to replace. And you can raise those from all that land that you just gave to the Domini, or you don't have to give it to the Domini to get the land because it already is Orthodox. You can just raise it anyway, assuming it's a state. Obviously, I don't have enough anymore to raise any military power to raise more Janissaries, but it's worth raising as many of those as you can, which that's 3 right there. You would be able to raise, I think, like 3 or 4 more there. And then it's worth also raising some cavalry and a couple other infantry to get up to your force limit, because early on you're in the best opportunity to conquer large amounts of land before other nations catch up to you, and not only tech, but also start to overcome your discipline bonus. You automatically start with military power focus, which I recommend you leave. Try and get the first 2 military techs as quick as possible and use that to conquer lots of lands. This army that you're raising, you should march up towards the Serbian border along with one of your other armies. Because if the Byzantines get an ally, it's usually either Serbia or Trebizond over here. Trebizond's not really much of a threat, so you can conquer them pretty easy. But Serbia can be a little bit trickier. If you conquer Serbia, you want to vassalize them. This is important, and it seems rather obscure, but Serbia actually has some pretty good military ideas. They have manpower recovery speed, reinforcement speed, and later on they have infantry combat, manpower modifiers, cavalry combat. Essentially, they're a really good vassal, or a march. And once you conquer them, they're small enough they tend to stay fairly loyal. But it will be most of the game before they're actually useful in your wars, but if you feed them like Bosnia, Albania, and Ragusa over here, even that land, they can contribute a good amount of troops to it. Plus, they also will handle any rebel groups that pop up, because they can field a fairly good army. Plus, you can also develop their gold mine province and make sure that they have enough money to maintain their army, which is always the issue with vassals and marches. So if you get them as a march, you get Crimea as a march up here, and you're allied to Tunis. That's 3 of your 4 diplomatic slots. If you ally yourself with somebody down here, that's 4, and that should be your alliance network. The Ottomans are usually strong enough to stand on their own. Once you conquer the Byzantines, you will get an event that essentially allows you to move your capital to Constantinople. It will immediately convert it to Islam, Sunni Islam, and it will also give it some more development, and it will make it your new capital, which means then you can assign Edirne to the Dimini just to complete this area. I recommend giving these other lands then here to the Dimini because it'll boost their influence early on, which is really useful. The next thing to realize, if you have the ability to do ages, that you will automatically get a large city, and you'll just in general start getting closer to ages of discovery, and it's very easy for the Ottomans to get a golden age in the age of discovery. You also have a unique age ability called Guns of Urban, which will give you plus 33% siege ability, which means taking forts and capital forts early on is really easy, and you want to use it as much as possible. Once you've subdued this region, you probably can't expand any further into Europe, because at this point Hungary, Austria, Bosnia, Poland, Lithuania, and other Catholics will be really annoyed with you for eliminating both Serbia and the Byzantines, and so I advise you leave Europe alone for the time being and focus on the Middle East. You do not have cores on this land like you used to in the older patches, but you will get a mission to conquer this region, and that will give you claims automatically so you can conquer it. I advise you do not pick a fight with the Mamelukes till you're about at least 5 military tech or 9 military tech, at which point your military strength will be much greater with them and you can easily steamroll them. The Korokwinnulu look large and dangerous, but they're not particularly that good. They're fairly unstable with a very big mismatch of religions in their lands. They're Shia, there's a lot of Sunni in their lands, they'll be facing rebellions, plus they tend to expand and get coalitions and generally get pretty unstable. So for initial conquest, you want to subdue Kandar, Dul Qadir, some of the Korokwinnulu, and from then on it's kind of up to you where you expand at that point. You'll get a mission that will give you should get it pretty early on. You don't want to take it too early. It's called Conquer the Levant, and it will give you claims. I can't show it. It'll give you claims on all the Mameluke land through here, including Jerusalem down here. I don't think it gives you Sinai. It'll give you claims on all this, which is nice. Unfortunately, it'll take you at least 2 or 3 wars to take all that land, which is why I was telling you wait till you're 5 or 9 military tech to take the mission and then attack them. You should be able to wipe them out pretty quickly. Once you take all this land, you'll easily be the largest in the Middle East. You'll get a free missionary from controlling Jerusalem, and you'll also get another mission. We'll get 1 or 2 missions. You'll get Conquer the Fertile Crescent over here, which is essentially subdue this modern-day Iraq region. Or you'll get Conquer Egypt, and it'll give you claims on all the rest of the Mameluke provinces, in which case your next goal should be conquer them and subdue the Middle East. You really don't have to worry about too much of a coalition because you're just that powerful. Plus, with Tunis on your side, Crimea is a march, you're really all set. You should focus on conquering the Arabian Peninsula fairly early on. Way I did it was I had a couple vassals, fed them land, annexed them later. When I did it as the Mamelukes, as the Ottomans, I just simply conquered it. At that point, once you've conquered the Middle East and the Mamelukes, which you should be able to do by 1550 or so, in about 100 years or more of gameplay, it's really up to you where you expand further on. If you're going to do the Unite Islam achievement, which I did in my last Let's Play, you have to control quite a few provinces. You have to control a province way over here in Ifini. You have to control Cordoba. You have to control Sardinia, Syracuse, and Messina. You also have to expand all the way over here and get Samarkand, which is up there, and Thata, which is over there. The rest you'll probably pick up just in your general conquests, honestly. It's a pretty hard achievement to get and do because just of how large amount of land you have to conquer. I wouldn't recommend doing that till you hit the final age of the game, Age of Revolutions, and you get the ability to unrestricted coring distance, because then you don't have to actually conquer all the land to get to this land. You can just simply take that one province, core it, and you're all set. And I do not recommend trying to expand into Europe unless you know what you're doing till you hit Age of Absolutism. Absolutism is a crazy modifier on the Ottomans, considering you already have 45% reduced core cost. It makes it even lower. You can start taking provinces with like 15 development for like 6 or 10 admin power. I took London, which had like 60 development, and it cost 23 admin to core, which is pretty crazy considering even right now it's 110 to core it, which is pretty amazing. The only thing you really have to watch out for as the Ottomans is a large coalition or alliance declaring war on you. Specifically, people like Spain, Hungary, Austria, Poland, Lithuania, or Russia tend to be your enemies. If you can ally yourself to Russia and stay allied to Russia, which is the struggle, pretty much no one will ever attack you even if you're in a coalition, assuming Russia becomes large and survives, just because of how many troops they'll bring to your defense. And other than that, the world is really your oyster. It's really easy to expand into India and conquer it. It's a lot harder to expand into Europe and conquer it. There's an achievement, Pasha of Paris. Take Paris and assign a Pasha towards it, which I haven't talked about, but it's a unique Ottoman thing which decreases unrest and state maintenance, but on the other hand, increases core construction cost and raising troops in that province. You can only assign it to provinces that are in a state, I believe, which makes it slightly less useful. This is the Ottomans. Trying to maintain control on your region is really hard. Historically, the Ottomans started to fall off in the 17th century, became the sick man of Europe, and then were wiped out in World War I, having joined the Central Powers of, the Austro-Hungarian Empire and Germany, and lost to the Allies and everyone else, and were disbanded. But if you're really strong, powerful Ottomans, you can reverse that history and instead conquer Europe and convert it to Islam. That's pretty much it for this guide. If you guys have any other recommendation, tips, or tricks, or anything, please leave those below in the comments. If you have any other countries you want me to do guides on, check out my playlist of all the countries I have done guides on first. But if you have other ones, please let me know, and I'll be happy to do guides for them in the future. In terms of rivals, just as a last summary, set whoever you like, just be careful they don't join an alliance against you. So that's it for the Ottomans. Thank you guys all for watching. Check out my Let's Play if you're interested to see how a 60-episode conquest of most of Europe went, and of course the Middle East. And if not, I'll see you guys in another video. Bye for now.